favor of the French, and one that will scale over time until you inevitably buff it up into its Castle Age form. But let's see if that's the plan for VortiX. Let's see if DeMusliM is going to follow the build that VortiX and Lucifer were innovating with, or if he's got something else to throw at us as we get into Game 2 of this best of 3.
Indeed, a rare showing of the French over here, but it is in the hands of a player who loves these little micro details, one of the best micro players in the game. Him and Lucifron, they just love these games where they can control smaller groups of knights and just chip away with damage everywhere. So I feel like for DeMusliM, the #1 storyline in this game is going to be how much damage is he taking from knights, because I don't think it's a matter of will he take damage from the knights, it's a matter of how much.
And one thing I am a little bit worried about here, like we crafted the, part of the reason, the logic for the French is like you were saying that you have to come out your pocket ecos quicker, right? Because you exhaust your safe resources faster because you double the villages. We do have to remember that the Malians have a little cheat sheet for that, a little solution to that problem. They can build cattle. So I wonder if that's a thought process for DeMusliM, is if he starts to see a lot of knights and it feels like he doesn't have map control, it's still not the end of the road. He can still just play safe in his base for an extended period of time.
There's a second element as well, and that's going to be intriguing to look at. Donsos. You look at other civilizations, they struggle to catch up with those knights with the spearmen. Donsos are a different story. They can throw their spears, and even if you can't catch up to the knights, you can still do quite a lot of damage to them and slowly chip away at their HP.
And then there's also javelins, right? Javelin's base damage is quite high. I think it's 8 in feudal, if I'm not mistaken, which is only half the damage is mitigated by armor for the French knights. That's pretty absurd when you think about it on the defensive, especially on a unit that has 6 tower range. So definitely possibilities with static comps for DeMusliM. Might be that he just wants to go into that stables opening, upgrade into the Warrior Scout, and then build maybe one Sofa. I think if you micro correctly with the Warrior Scout as well against the French Knight, the Sofa can win. Because one cool thing we've seen used the way of the French in the past is that if you see you're going to clash with your opponent, like say they got a spear, you charge a scout in first, and they bait the brace, and then the knight comes in afterwards, right? It's a really effective little tool to use at a high level.
Yeah, looks like the landmark of choice for DeMusliM is going to be the Mansa Quarry, so no Saharan trade network, which means 2 things. A, he doesn't want to trade, but also it's the fact that his gold mine is much more exposed. So many times we see players just going for the Saharan trade network as a quasi-outpost to defend the gold mine with. That's not going to be the case for him. Instead, he goes for the Mansa Quarry, which could open up the option for a second TC play, having trickled in the stone.
I think it's to the point you were saying about the Donzos, right? Because if you just build a few Donzos, the knight doesn't even try to annoy you because he gets a javelin in the face. And nobody, I don't know if you know this in life, Lidakor, but I found 100% of people I've talked to do not want to receive a javelin in the face.
I can understand them, to be honest. I probably wouldn't want to receive a javelin in my face either.
I like how you don't question why I've been threatening people with a javelin in the face.
I mean, I cost
that.
way too many games with you to know that I shouldn't question details like that.
That's true. You don't want to get a javelin in the face. But with the tech up coming through, the Mansa, honestly, I've been expecting more players to try and get back towards the Mansa. Like, if you don't feel like you're ever... Because I feel like a lot of players were building the defensive landmark even when they weren't being raided. And they were forfeiting 2 villages worth of production as a result. Or almost 2, right? Because it's 75 resources.
Alright, stable opening here for DeMusliM. Obviously needs something to deal with those knights with, but he's going to open with a couple of scouts. Makes me wonder whether it's actually going to be a professional scout's direction. And there it is, indeed. He's going to play pro scouts. Now, he's going to have to be cautious with those lancers roaming the map, but don't forget, the scouts do outrun the knights by default if they are not carrying the carcasses.
That's true. And there's no guarantee anyone... No, I'm kidding. Of course he wants those carcasses. It's interesting because I feel like I was expecting this play to come out the Malian sooner, but then people discovered the Farimba build, and that's all that mattered, right? So we never really got to see this scout side of the Malians truly thrive. Glad it's starting to make an appearance, because I think we were glad that Pro Scouts was gone for a while after it was the most dominant thing for a long period of time. But I'll be the first to say it. I miss it. I actually really do miss it.
Yeah, it's nice to see it appear every once in a while. Now, looking at the deer spots for DeMusliM, these are not generous deer spots. One of them being outright on the front. That's going to be tough to defend. And then the other one on the northern side, also a possible angle from which Lucifron could, or VortiX rather, could approach DeMuslim's base from. So getting those carcasses in will be a bit of a challenge because, as you see, knights are already coming from the northern side. So neither of those hunts are easily accessible.
But we have got the Donzos coming out already, and you already highlighted you don't even necessarily want to try to pro. But he might get a freebie. And that little detail there, everyone take note. This is how you improve your French gameplay. How many of you click to attack and leave it? As in, you just look away. No, don't do that. Do what VortiX just done there. Lance in, wait, then slap your sword out. Because for some reason, it doesn't like trigger in the Frenchman's brain that he has damage buff until you delay it. Don't ask me why it's coded that way. Coding's very hard. Have you ever looked at programming code, Lidakor?
Unfortunately, I did, so...
I copy and paste. Much simpler. Right. But there is a weird behavior. I'm still kind of... I don't know if I want the devs to change it. I feel like it should be changed because it's just weird. But I know some people like it because it's like an extra skill layer, right? Even if it is a janky skill layer. Man, DeMusliM really has just taken the role of the turtle here.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand why. The Monster Quarry is set on gold right now, so he's going to play 1 TCs, but he's got a nice low passive gold generation. He's going to have a very compact base with the carcasses being brought in too, and he's also going to get survival techniques. So I would not be surprised to see him just turtle, and then just break out once, especially because he's building up a decent mass of Dunsos as well. Although VortiX already has archers as a response, makes me wonder if DeMusliM is actually thinking about just trying to play Castle Age here.
Quite possibly. I think the real reason for the Donzos is to secure those deer stacks, right? Like move out, get off my lawn, right? Let me have my deers. But the problem, as you said, is with archers now being there, DeMusliM has to pivot. He has got enough wood to do so and get into javelin throwers, right? He has still got the pit mine generating gold as well, so it's affordable. I wouldn't mind seeing it. Alternatively, he could just do this. Sofas. I mean, Sofas are incredibly tanky. While they won't, I don't think they will win in a one-on-one with a knight. It'll be close, but I think like a knight will peel back to keep getting the damage buff. They will last long enough to get around the backside onto those archers.
That's a good point. Sofas are definitely at least a cost-efficient solution to match those knights. You're going to have comparable mobility, and you're going to have a force that doesn't completely collapse when clashing with knights. That's definitely one of the advantages compared to other civilizations where your best tool to keep track of the knights and also engage with them is just the horsemen, but they will just die to the knights.
Yeah, I think the logic is like a one-on-one, the knight should still win. But if you look at it from a cost efficiency standpoint, like if we have X amount of resources and we invest that, it should be more or less a stalemate. Because I think obviously the Sofas will have more numbers, right? Well, this little raid in. You just saw the javelins thrown instantly to be a little bit of a nuisance. It means that VortiX has to retreat. The worst part about this is because he's playing tree line, he can't necessarily get the distance to return fire. And the scout, although it gives him an edge in terms of vision, it seems to be neglected. So he needs to be careful about the way he works around this side, but great micro so far from VortiX to not lose any of his knights. Even to a wolf.
Yeah, looks like DeMusliM is going to commit to a couple of blacksmith upgrades here, so he definitely feels like he will need to fight this one. Don't forget, he also has the scouts upgrade out there, so as much as he's now done picking up the carcasses, suddenly those scouts turn into combat units, and this is a favorable engagement here for DeMusliM.
And the brilliant thing about these scouts, because they heal so easily after a battle, right? You can afford to get them down to 10% HP just using them as body blockers. As long as they get away, right? They'll quickly heal up. And that's what he's trying to do, like get around the back, keep the knights close. But when the archers arrive, it kind of changes the idea, right? Where you need to focus fire. The wraparound will come in. Now the knights at risk of getting pinched here, but notice VortiX very content to stand his ground because there's a weakness in DeMusliM's comp. He has no solution to the spearmen.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget, as much as those scouts come in handy just to buff the numbers that DeMusliM has on the field, they will just get torn apart by just a couple of spearmen. So as much as the numbers were there for DeMusliM, the quality wasn't. Sofas obviously being weaker than knights, Donzos being there for sure, but the rest of his army was just basically scouts, which are kind of feeble against what VortiX has on the field.
And the tough part is when you build scouts in this situation, you know, the idea is that you get value out of them over multiple engagements, right? Because they'll heal very quickly between them compared to normal scouts. Yep. When you lose them in one battle like that, you really feel the extra 90 food cost. Of course, there's a unit that can strike harder, but when you're using it to strike into knights, most of the damage is just a tickle, right? Barely anything is going through into the flesh.
DeMusliM is moving out over here, but he needs to be cautious because VortiX is slowly rallying forces, and there is something else that VortiX is doing behind this. He's not fully committing to this assault, instead he's working for a second town center, already operating with one pocket eco or one pocket base expansion on the deer on the left side, and then the second deer is going to be secured by a second town center.
And this is frustrating for DeMusliM because, you know, he wanted to get his hands on these deer eventually, right? He wanted to try and milk that from the map. Hasn't really been able to a grand degree, right? Like, he got blocked on the front side of his base. The retracted deer for VortiX have already started to be harvested with pocket economy. And now with the TC drop on the other, like, that's completely marked off the map for him. So really frustrating situation for him. And the other detail that's really annoying for him is VortiX hasn't really been hemorrhaging the Knights. That might change here, though. The Donzos do dive in. And this is a costly fight, considering how low the Knights are, or at least it would be if it wasn't for the fact that he's just so quick to move them away.
Yeah, we still have two archers on the backline slowly picking off the Donzos. Such a nice little detail. Sofas didn't directly focus them down, and the Donzos were gone before they could do a lot of damage to the Knights.
Just great players there by VortiX. I honestly thought he was going to throw away a few of the Knights, but just so chunky, so almost impossible to breach. DeMusliM, it sets him back again. He doesn't want to lose these trickles on the retreat. We'll have to leave one or two behind, but notice he's transitioning hard into Sofas. And one issue for VortiX is, I don't even know if he's got Chivalry yet. I feel like I haven't seen any pluses above the Knights' heads. And if that's the case, then these Sofas can actually begin to win out with the amount that he's building.
Exactly. So VortiX needs to be cautious. He's on 2 TCs, but he might need to rally his forces closer to his base at this point, because it seems like he's overextending a little, and that could easily be punished by DeMusliM over here. Looks like a couple of archers will be probably taken down by this Sofas as they retreat. Although, VortiX is doing a great job just charging in with the Knights and getting some freebies.
Yeah, that was a quick yoink. And the cool thing is when you get the charge off like that, the damage buff lingers for a moment, so your opponent has to think twice. And there was a little bit of hesitation there. That cost DeMusliM the opportunity to pinch one. Javelin should be recharging soon, I'd imagine, but at this stage, VortiX is back in safe territory. It's very easy, and I just love the fact that he uses cycle charges so efficiently here. As soon as it's off cooldown, ram that lance into someone's face.
And he's bloodthirsty. The moment DeMusliM starts retreating, he's going to charge in, get a couple of picks on those Donzos. He isn't standing idly back at home with the army regrouping. He tries to get every single piece of damage that he can do. Just get a couple of arrows into the bodies of those Donzos, and uh-oh, that's a problem. That's a big problem for DeMusliM, having issues with the food income.
And he hasn't prepped for this, right? Like, I mean, he's got a granary somewhere due to the wheelbarrow, but, like, having to sidestep into that while keeping production going elsewhere, are you going to have to put some more people in gold? Is that long-term sustainable? He has at least got the 2 pit mines. I'm a little bit worried if that ever gets scouted out, and I think that's why DeMusliM has to keep pressure on the front side. He knows how this one works, how this matchup goes. If he ever stops being the pressurer, these Knights are going to go around to his flanks, and they're going to find his extensions into his back corner.
Yeah, now DeMusliM is going to loop around. He's going to see no villagers that he can take. Oh, that's a caster curse, KP. That has to be a caster curse.
That was a very French caster curse. Oh, yes, he has been found out. We'll be able to walk back in time. And remember, he has got an eco advantage, right? Like, he's got a village account advantage. However, these Sofas are proving a nuisance. They're such a bloody fast unit. Just idle time alone could be the edge that DeMuslim's looking for. DeMusliM, who, by the way, is going up with something unexpected here. So unexpected that most people wouldn't remember the name of it if it wasn't on their screen. It's the Grand Fulani Corral.
He's got 25 villagers sent to that landmark. He's not messing around. He's on the way to Castle, and well, for VortiX and the French, we know that obviously an extended feudal age is not something that they are concerned about. That might not actually be the case against the Malians, who could just start flooding the field with Musafari warriors, potentially javelin throwers. So this is actually alarming for VortiX.
He hasn't set up any little branches either, right? Like, usually the way we'd see this play, it makes it obvious, but people build branches around it. We've even seen some players look like they were going to go for the Fulani and then go back for the Farimba. But Farimba being nerfed the way it was, a little bit less desirable. And I think DeMuslim's already accepted that he's not going to be just all about gold. He wants to have food sources. He needs it if he wants to keep pushing Sofas like this.
Yeah, indeed. For those of you that don't know, the Grand Fulani Corral actually provides cattle, or nearby cattle, more precisely, with extra food per minute. And, well, so far, I don't see a single bit of cattle.
Exactly. That's the bit I was going to put. It's like, yeah, it provides extra food when you have food, right? It's the rich get richer. However, if you're poor, not so much. But looks like we have now got ranchers coming out, so we'll start just pushing out the oxens. I think he even built additional mills to push them out faster. And, oh, this is the turning point. This is where things get really annoying. You just saw the upgrade come through for the Sofas, but on top of that, you may notice another upgrade queued by DeMusliM that's going to give an additional 2 armor to those cavalry units.
Yeah, imported armor is just such a critical upgrade for the Sofas. There it is, +2 coming in. It's not even an expensive upgrade, easy to afford for the Muslim.
It's like,
it's
what,
one of the best
250
upgrades
resources?
of the game.
Yeah, it's 250 resources for technically 4 armor upgrades, right? Because it's 2 ranged armor and 2 melee armor.
Exactly, that's a crazy upgrade. Now, concern here for the Muslim could be numbers, because he just invested a lot of resources into Castle Age, doesn't really have access to safe wood, and it looks like VortiX, seeing the Castle Age from his opponent, he's going to think about diving in.
It's so hard, though. The amount of Donzos here, they're much more chunky, right? Because they're aged up. They're Castle Age units. VortiX is still playing feudal. Do not be deceived by this battle. It's not as simple as it appears. VortiX just trying to bait with the Knights, but not getting the attention of the Donzo just yet. Has the body block before his archers are accessed, but the lack of spears to defend the front side, it looks like he might have to retreat. The Muslim, of course, with such a slow comp, still reluctant to come out, though. One village is just being sacrificed in the meantime. Remember, behind this VortiX, it's 2 TCs versus 1.
Yes.
So if he keeps doing this, he forces this stalemate, and he kills a few villages here or there, VortiX will eventually hit Castle Age with a matching army.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not only that VortiX has a massive eco lead compared to the Muslim, at least on the villager department, he's also shutting down a lot of the eco here from the Muslim. And the Muslim, he's going to push this away slow and steady, but Lumberjacks were still idle for so long.
Remember, DeMusliM does have passive income elsewhere. We always have to consider the Fulani now being in play, someone not used to seeing, which is why his food is decent here. The gold side is a bit worrisome in that he's not been able to set up his 3rd pit mine yet, despite the fact he has free access on the south side. With this clash coming in, lack of Donzos, and so many knights remaining, DeMusliM may have overplayed his hand.
Yeah, terrific micro by VortiX. It's very difficult to focus down all the Donzos one by one in such a chaotic engagement, but there was a terrific move by VortiX to do so, and now Donzo's gone, those knights reign supreme, and suddenly those gold miners are more than exposed.
He thought about it. He's like, wait, lots of injured knights here. Maybe not a hard commitment just yet. Just keep baiting the Sofas back. He needs to get a few more spears out here. Now, remember, VortiX, he's not getting the charge off, so this is a bad fight for him to take. He doesn't want to give over the edge that he's built up here. He wants to be able to just keep pressing and inching that advantage. And with so many of his spears, and now also his Sofas being butchered like this, DeMusliM, even with all the cattle ranches being set up as they are, might struggle to replace his losses.
The micro is just terrific here by VortiX. He's doing such a good job picking off every single new Donzo that arrives. And once again, now he's retreating in an orderly fashion, still picking off the Donzos that are chasing, many of the Sofas being weak as well. He got so much out of this engagement, made sure that he reaches Castle Age in relative safety, also managed to destroy a tremendous amount of army from the opposing side. You see, the army value destroyed is even despite the fact that the Muslim had the Castle Age upgrades in for quite a while.
And you expect that of the French Knights, right? Chunky units, they hit as hard as they get hit. These Sofas, you know, they are more cost efficient in large numbers. They can be, especially at this stage, but it's the numbers that matter. In that situation, VortiX had kept an edge for a very long time, but now VortiX, I think he needs to stop messing around this feudal time, and he knows it. He's buying his way up. It is going to be Castle Age on the way, and it is, interestingly enough, not going to be the meta choice. Raw Institute has been the go-to landmark in 92% of games. There you go. I put a weird number on it so you believe it. Guildhall fell by the wayside, I want to say 6 months ago.
Interesting approach here. I'm not necessarily against it, given the fact that VortiX is just losing unit after unit over here. It's non-stop engagements. It's not like he's building up a large ball of knights. So the impact of the actual HP buff on those knights that he would get from the Royal Armory is somewhat questionable. I think it still would be the better choice short term, but VortiX is playing long term over here. He's getting the walls up. He's preparing for a long game, possibly.
Have mercy, my lord. I didn't order the wall. I just built it. It looks like the rest of them will be able to build it up. So, choke point created. VortiX, this might make sense from it if he wants to transition into full static comp to go for the Guildhall. Because now that he's created those funnel points, he can just rely on Spearmen, Men-at-Arms, these type of units, and maybe play for a later timing. Oh, what's that? This wall that was made to make us safe isn't safe? Oh, we'll just go through the other side. See ya.
Oh, trench is being dug over here as VortiX is just going to play hide and seek with those Sofas. Oh,
let's just make another gate and go inside, you know?
He could escape on the right side. There's a very weak part of the wall. He could just burn his way through, but it looks like Knights will just chase this down.
Sure you can though. Like so that pillar is like a bait because I'm pretty sure VortiX can delete the pillar.
I think the
I know the
adjacent
half
tile that's like halfway done.
I get you, but that's going to take too long, right? Like, by the time you've torched that down, there are so many spears up your tush keys, you will never take a pip again.
Yeah, it's no longer an option. He started torching down the gate. At that time, it would have been an option. Now it's a little too late. He's just going to have to get 1 or 2 villager picks if he can. But even that 1 villager survives, only thing he could accomplish with this is make sure that VortiX stays inside his base. But that's something that VortiX is fine with. He's got a nice eco lead of 30-40. That being said, though, there's massive amounts of passive resource income for DeMusliM, partly now coming from the cattle that is now close to that Grand Philonic Oral.
And, you know, long term, we do have to contemplate trade as an option for DeMusliM, right? Because you might eventually want a little bit extra gold. He only has access to 3 pit mines, but like he has the long length of the map to go for trade. I don't expect it anytime too soon, but this is probably in the back of VortiX's mind, right? If he ever does just sit back and says, oh, maybe I'll just go Imperial Age, he might be punished with a trade boom from the Malians.
Yeah, but speaking of trade, the player that is actually walled off entirely back at home and has a safe trade route is actually VortiX. And, you know, we haven't really been talking much about the French trade, given how little French were utilized recently. But French also have an extremely powerful trade, and in the long run, it probably is just as good as the Malian trade is.
Something that used to be incredibly good is falling off a little bit, but is going to make an appearance here. Archers with poisoned arrows from the Malians. Now, this is an interesting one, because when it came out, it was considered broken, but then they nerfed it without telling anyone, where I think they capped the amount of poison ticks to something like, it was either 12 or 10, which meant that it was less effective against armor units than it had been in the early phases. But we are going to get to see it here. Those archers, they are trying to whittle away at the spearmen, but afterwards they'll easily munch into the knights. This is a fight that is most definitely not going to be going the way of VortiX. So many sofas on the flanks, they're able to chase away half the army. The other half are going to be left to the wolves.
Yeah, now the Malian power is starting to show on the battlefield. Imported armor for the sofas, almost bulletproof. And then you have the poison arrow archers, which won't just be great at picking off all those spearmen, they actually do pretty well against those knights as well because of the poison arrows.
No, VortiX, I wonder if you even notice, because it's one of those things, right? You know how we usually talk about things like raw bloodlines? After a fight, you're like, huh, he must have had raw bloodlines. I think poison arrows is even harder to realize unless you get back into an engagement. And even then, it feels like units are dying so quickly, you might not be able to click on them fast enough to see the poison icon. Clash comes in next to the TC, where farms have been set up for VortiX as well. He was forced to frontside eco, thought he was safe in this area, but he's going to find out the hard way that this is the Malian's time to shine.
Yeah, the timing is terrible over here for VortiX. He was just getting ready to drop a keep to protect his forward position, but DeMusliM with the perfect timing comes in here, and there's gonna be no chance for VortiX to get that castle up right here on the front, but he also doesn't have the army to stop this with. Poison arrow archers really just coming in clutch and just massacring those knights.
Cheap, efficient solution, right? And now VortiX, like, what's your option? You don't want to go into arbitrary this situation. You know, you don't have enough gold to keep pushing the knights, yet alone make that transition. Spearmen as a front line, not a good idea up against archers. I mean, DeMusliM has dissected this down to a simplicity of mass archers to win, and without needing the Farimba, he will lock in the dub for the Malians.
I actually loved the addition of the Grand Philonic Oral, because at the end of the day, the lack of the Farimba garrison didn't really show on the battlefield. He still had the production available, but he made sure that he has a very steady passive income, not just for gold, but also for food. And that's a key thing against the French. VortiX didn't really have an option to raid beyond DeMusliM reaching Castle Age, simply because there was nothing to raid. There were no exposed villagers, no pocket ecos, a very compact base, and that was the game plan the whole time for DeMusliM, starting from the professional scouts opening into just having that insane passive resource income on the food and gold.